Now breaking in for the Congressman, Tom Reed, press conference live from Washington.
Just literally left the floor of the U.S. House and I'm back in my office here in Washington, D.C. to do our media call because we're always committed to being accessible to you guys and having a conversation, and just appreciate all that you do in your role in your capacity as reporters across the country and across the state. But so obviously a very historic vote, and I am very happy that we took a positive step forward here today to take on this healthcare crisis that is amongst us in the coronavirus, but also to address the economic crisis. The vote today obviously joins with our Senate partners and with the President in one united voice to say that we are united when it comes to the threats that we see from this virus itself, but also the economic devastation that is going off as a result of it. And so what we have done with this bill is hopefully sent the message to the American people. We're listening. We know the anxiety and fear that is taken over our country. The people are afraid. Is it safe? Is the virus going to continue down this path and cause such disruption? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to have a paycheck? Is that business that I spent my entire life creating now gone? You know, is a business going to be able to have enough money because we've shut down the American economy as a result of this crisis to the tune of $22 trillion going offline overnight, essentially? Will there be enough money to keep the economy spinning, to keep the paychecks flowing, to keep that dream that America provides when it comes to a job? And so right now, obviously, it's a big vote, probably the biggest vote I've taken in my congressional career. And as I reflect upon it, it's a vote I didn't even put a card in the box because we were united on the floor of the House. And the Senate was united on the floor of the Senate. And the President was united by supporting and will sign this legislation in minutes. That should give hope to America. That should give hope to America that the elected officials in Washington, D.C. set aside their partisanship, set aside their political rhetoric, and they acted as Americans today. And as a united American power, there's no doubt in my mind that this crisis that's represented by this virus and this crisis that is represented by the economic devastation that is going off will be a thing of the past, and we will come out of this stronger than ever before, because that is what America does. When America is tested, as we have been tested time and time again, go back to the creation of America with the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, you go to the panics and the Great Depression, the wars of World War I, World War II. America has faced its crises time and time again and wondered if we'd be able to get through it. But at the end of the day, the sun came up. America stood strong. And we continue to lead the world because we are that shining beacon of light on the hill. So I am proud to walk into this office, having stood together on the floor of the House, to send a message to the world that as we go through this together, we are going to come out on the other side stronger, better, and a lot more wiser as we have gone through it together. So we've got a lot more work to do, but you all know the details of the bill. You know what we're trying to do with the heart of the bill. You know what we're trying to do in regards to the crisis. And now the work begins anew, because now we have to lay a course for opening this country back up. And we have to do that in a way, in my humble opinion, where we take on the virus and we give confidence to America that it's safe enough to return to work. It's safe enough to turn back on the lights. And as we turn back on the lights, it's going to be a lot of hard work in order to get that done and get that done right. So let's just take a moment to reflect on the success that we did here, but realize it's a fleeting moment because the work begins anew. And now it's time for us to continue to stand together as we lay the plan and we put forth the ideas that will allow us to turn the lights back on in America bright and strong. So at that, I give us those words, I guess. Bear with me. I've been running on very limited sleep and drove down here after putting out some fires in the district and continue to put out fires all day. Drove down here at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and now we're going to get in the car and drive back home. Because my top priority through all of this is home. And it's not just the 23rd Congressional District. It's all of that region. And it's all of that state. And it's all of this nation. So with that, I'll open it up to questions and see what's on your mind.
All right, we're going to dive right in. This is my first time doing this, so bear with me. We have Eric from Jamestown Post-Journal.
Hi, Congressman. How are you doing this afternoon?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I just wanted to ask, I know with this $2.2 trillion stimulus, there's talks of whether this could last a month, 2 months. Do you feel that this is something that's going to have to be taken up in the near future to get this economy rolling, like you had mentioned, to get the lights back on? Is this something that's going to be something we have to revisit every so often?
No, let's be very clear. This is intended with this $2.2 trillion package to get us through this crisis, to get us through this short-term durational event known as the coronavirus. Mm-hmm. But then we got to open the lights back on. That's going to take some more work. So I do believe there's going to be the need for phase 4. I already see that on the horizon. I also see the need for us to keep working on our healthcare front and make sure you combine that standard of safe enough and that phase 4 effort to see where the dust settles, because we're going to know a lot more in a couple of weeks. We're going to know a lot more in 30 days. We're going to know a lot more in 90 days. We have where this virus goes, what happened as a result of the turning off the lights, and then we'll be able to put together a timeline that's strong, and we're going to be able to put together a timeline that gets us back to work and understand exactly the magnitude of what we have ahead of us.
Thanks. I was hoping to get a quick follow-up.
Sure.
Just wouldn't mind getting your thoughts on the governor's, how he's been, doing. Your thoughts on Governor Cuomo? Yeah,
no, he's dealing with a crisis. There's no doubt about it. And so I appreciate his decision-making. I appreciate, him having to make calls in a very dynamic, fluid situation. And so as we've reached out to him and offered assistance with a manufacturer delivering plastic shields from the district to coordinating together to trying to help out on the Medicaid issue that clearly is going to be an issue for him into the budget. We'll continue to look for areas we agree upon, and we're in this together. And even though we may disagree adamantly on many of policy issues and many of ways to go and take the state in a direction that it wants to go right now, we're all Americans. He's a New Yorker. I'm a New Yorker. I support his decisions. I will disagree privately, because that's the prudent course to do. And publicly, we keep working together. we're going to get through this, and we're going to get it behind us.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Congressman.
Yep, thank you.
All right, we're going to go to Rick Miller.
Good afternoon, Congressman.
Good afternoon, Rick.
The governor is continually begging for more ventilators. There was a little tiff between him and the president, I guess, over the president didn't think he needed as many as the governor thought. Are you helping out in this area at all?
Yeah, no, we're helping out on all fronts. So obviously, there's a need across the entire country for PPEs, masks, gowns, ventilators, respirators. I'm talking to colleagues, for example, in northern New Jersey. They have a hot zone going off, obviously close to New York City. And so it is concerning when, if you want to take the entire stockpile of 20,000 ventilators and put them to New York City today, there's other areas of the state that need, or of the nation that need those ventilators. And so I think what, obviously this conflict is, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of need across the country, and what we have to do is continue to work together. So I'm not going to get involved in any type of dispute on the number of ventilators needed here or there. What I'm just going to do is do my part wherever they are needed, wherever they're needed in the nation, wherever they're needed in the state, wherever they're needed in the district, and God forbid we don't have God forbid, hopefully we never have that need in the district. We are monitoring our healthcare capacity on a regular basis, making sure they have the ventilators and respirators and equipment and supplies they need to tend to the base demand in the district. And if the surge happens because a hot zone pops off in the district, we want to make sure we know what they have and what they need in order to get that done. So we're in constant communication with the folks on the front line. So bottom line, we can get through this, and we're not going to argue over numbers. What we're going to argue about is how to get those ventilators where they're needed most, and if there's not enough of them there, let's work together to figure out how to build more and get them delivered.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, we're moving on to Tappan to Greater Olean.
Hi, Congressman. There's also been a discussion about a shortage of testing kits in the district. The Cattaraugus County today announced its first confirmed case, and I know that's been a big concern among public health officials in that county is the lack of testing kits. Would you like to comment on that situation?
Yeah, well, first on the testing kits and the numbers, I really want to send a message to folks that the fact that we're having positive tests it should not be concerning because we know the virus is here. The virus is in America. And because it's a small world today, you're going to come across the virus. And the issue of testing is designed to make sure we know where the virus is at, that we don't spread it as fast as we would if we didn't know it was amongst us. And so the testing is very critical to get that information. But I hear this kind of narrative out there, boy, I just don't, all these tests are going positive, and that's a real problem. It's to me, that is not the concern. The concern is making sure that we test enough people, and get these antibody tests into the field so we know who not only has the virus, but those that have had it. That's past tense. So those who have it and those that had it. That gives us a lot of data to be able to get to that position, in my opinion, where we can declare confidently, safe enough to go back to work. It's safe enough to turn the lights back on because we know what's going on with the virus, we know where it's been, we know where it's going, and we can make some informed decisions based on that data. So to me, the testing shortage is a real concern. That's why one of the first actions we took on a bipartisan basis, and we supported, dealt with getting funding for testing. That's what Speaker Pelosi indicated, and that's what that was all about. So we got to try to allocate these tests more effectively and efficiently. Totally agree. We're working on that. We got to make sure that the reagent material that is part of those kits continues to be part of the supply chain being delivered where those test kits are being made and where they're assembling them. I worked with a company out of Washington that is a lab out there. We're working all angles and relationships with members, Kathy McMorris Rogers districts, for example. I mean, that's where that lab was, to do what we can to coordinate the effort to the extent we possibly can in order to get those testing kits constructed, get them deployed, new testing kits compiled, get the research approved, and get that data, because we need that data to make sure we can accurately make some informed decisions as to what's going on with the virus.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to Vaughn Golden.
Hey, Tom, how are you doing?
Doing well, Vaughn. How you doing?
Oh, managing. I wanted to ask you about timeline here. Is it safe, in your opinion, to put a deadline on these kind of things, to turn the lights back on? And, the president has put out the idea of kind of getting back to normalcy around Easter. Do you think that's necessarily a safe thing to be putting a timeline on this at this point?
Sure, I think, when I hear that, what I hear is a goal. And we should always have a goal. I mean, I was a swimmer all my life, and one of the things we always measured ourselves against was a goal. And so the goal of Easter, I mean, that is not something I would be opposed to. But the point is, you got to do it when it's safe enough. And I think one of the lessons, and I even heard the governor making a comment about it, that maybe shutting down the entire state at one time was maybe not the best public health strategy. I would agree with him in regards to that, because there's going to be areas of the country that have gone through that hot zone. There are going to be areas of the country that maybe, because of how it geographically is set up, could be opened back up. I know that's a more difficult process, but that's why we need to be planning now for that window of opportunity where we can start turning the lights on in America again. That's my vision. That's what I believe. That's what's guiding me and my principles and the work we're doing in the district, for example, to make sure that that our healthcare providers have access to the supplies, equipment, supply chain relationships in order to tap into those private suppliers, the state suppliers, the federal suppliers, and the backup emergency suppliers, as well as some creative workarounds that we have already laid into concrete in order to be relying upon if we need it down the road. And so having a goal, having a date, absolutely is something that's prudent. But you got to be able to match it up with what's going on in the virus, and you got to have a much more deeper strategy than we're going to turn the lights on one date across the nation. That to me is not realistic. I think the realistic way to look at it is you set a goal, you see where we stand. We're going to have a lot more information. We're going to have a lot more of Mother Nature taking its course with this virus, because this is a Mother Nature created crisis. This is Mother Nature doing what Mother Nature does. And so we'll know a lot more as we get closer and closer to these goals, and what we can accomplish on them, we accomplish. And then we shoot for another goal date, and we shoot for another goal date. And that's how I've conducted my life, and I think a lot of Americans conduct their life. And I think that's not a bad way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. And real quick, your reaction to Congressman Massey's moves today?
I always obviously respect every member of Congress. They obviously have a constitutional responsibility. They have an obligation to their constituents, and I'll defer to their constituents as to whether or not what he chose to do today was prudent. And, that's up to the people that he represents. As I stand here and obviously have a different approach, I would have done it obviously much different than the way that it went down. But that being said, I always respect members of elected officials and their obligations as they see it. And at the core, I trust the wisdom of the people that individual, that man or woman represents, to be the check on whether or not that was a prudent decision to make.
Thank you much.
We'll move on to Jerry Grumsky.
Oh, hey, Tom. How you doing?
Doing well, Jerry. How you doing?
Good. Talking about Congressman Massey, I mean, you had to get up in the middle of the night and drive down here. Other members of Congress had to do the same thing. Then you're trying to do social distancing on the floor of the House, which isn't the easiest thing to do. Do you think that what he did here put you and your colleagues in more danger than they ought to have been?
Well, I'm not. Obviously, we all have a job to do, and it comes with risk, and it's just like every other American person out there today, and these unsung heroes that are showing up at work every day. So, whether or not we were exposed to any undue risk I mean, I see people every day who are out there working hard. So, I'm really not going to comment on that. I mean, it is what it is. I have a job to do, just like every other American, and we'll do that job in the way that it demands us to do. And so we'll let the people that he represents be the ultimate judge as to what his decision-making was today.
Okay. One other very different question. Governor Cuomo continues to make it very, very clear that he's very upset about both the amount of funding in the bill for the state and the fact that the Medicaid language that he was seeking apparently got dropped at the last moment. What could you tell us about that in terms of your reaction to what the governor is saying and whatever happened with that Medicaid provision?
Yeah, well, and I appreciate your clarification, Jerry, when we were talking in real time as we were trying to fight to get that Medicaid provision included in the bill. Lee Zeldin kind of took up that charge and led that charge on behalf of the state to make sure that technical problem was taken care of. I was still very glad and very supportive of the provision in Phase 2 of the Medicaid 6.2% enhancement that allowed the counties to be protected because of the way we do the Medicaid share at the county. But the language that we were working on had nothing to do with that provision. These are two separate issues, as you know. Mm-hmm. And so we were working that language very hard, and the whole delegation, we sent a letter in real time, thought we had an opportunity. We got my understanding of it. Obviously, we're working virtually. We're working teleworking and working the district at the same time and the needs of the district. Is that it was offered, put on the table, and it was rejected. So that was being done in the Senate by Mitch McConnell on our behalf. We asked Kevin McCarthy's office to raise the concern with us. It was raised, and it didn't make it into the final package. So, we'll let history judge as to exactly how that went down. The reality of the situation, though, is one, I've watched the governor, say short here, $3 billion of aid going to New York State, and it's $15 billion shortfall. All these numbers, talking to the elected officials, I've had at least 4 or 5 different elected official teleconferences staying in contact, and I've had more interpretations of what the budget deficit in Albany is going to be by the people that are actually in Albany making the decisions than these numbers that Cuomo's throwing around as to where his budgetary situation is. The fact is, he went into the budget with $6 billion short. He obviously is going to have a significant impact on cash flow, just like the rest of the country, because the lights have been turned off. And so I understand his concern. So I'm willing to work wherever we can to see if we can do this in a way that the counties are protected and the state can do its budget in order to get done. But it's going to be a difficult, tall task for them up in Albany to get this budget done by April 1st. But I'll leave it to the state officials as to how they deliver that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're moving on to Terry Frank.
Yeah, hi, Tom.
Hey, Terry.
Good to talk with you, and glad you're still awake.
Hey, man, we're going.
I did along the lines of what Jerry had asked here a moment ago. We've been hearing these different numbers. The governor said for the coronavirus fight itself, the state is getting about $5 billion, and essentially that's it. Could you break down how many dollars is the state getting out of this $2.2 trillion?
Yeah. So we're doing that math as we speak. Obviously, we just passed the bill, and we just got that language. The good news is we got money going to the state. Originally, talking to senators, they weren't going to take up state stabilization funds. They were going to deal with that later, but wisdom took over, and we were able to get that fund opened up. And also, if you notice, we were very instrumental, I believe. We weighed in directly with the senators. We weighed in from the state in a bipartisan upstate, downstate manner with Max Rose from Staten Island to make sure that there was local assistance, that it wasn't just going all to the state, that there would be local assistance delivered to the localities. I do believe, in my humble opinion, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but it's just important that this was done. We cracked the door because there is local aid direct assistance in this bill. So not only does it all go to the state, For those communities with 500,000 people or more, we were able to secure a direct injection of cash assistance or benefits, I should say, not cash, reimbursement and benefits to the local municipalities by doing that. Now, I understand I don't have any communities in our district with 500,000 people or more, but the point is it sets us up for the Phase 4 position that the local municipalities need to be considered too as the state gets its reimbursement. And then now that we've opened up the door to those with 500,000 people or more, we need to go even deeper to the smaller, more rural communities too. Bottom line, I mean, I'm getting initial reports. I mean, I know the governor's, and I haven't been following the governor's press calls, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm on the phone. I'm working the district trying to get people out of Peru, Morocco. We're trying to get people assistance because they lost their job. We're trying to connect pipelines for hospital equipment and other things. So bottom line, I've heard different numbers in the reports I get read out on, and where it was like $3 billion last week, and now it's $5 billion. At the end of the day, there will be money coming to the state. It's a significant sum of money. There's $100 billion going to our health providers. There's a bump up in appropriations that will use traditional tools to go to the state and to local municipalities under a traditional state-federal partnerships, things like block grants and things along those lines. So there's money in there, and we just got to cobble it all together, and we'll digest it, and we'll get you a hard number. But, it's pretty clear to me, given the economic devastation plus the virus health crisis, we're going to have to come back at this, and we're going to have to let the dust settle a little bit to know what the ultimate number is going to be.
Thank you, Congressman. Be well.
You too. Thanks so much.
All right. We're going to move over to Jason Sample.
Yes. Good afternoon, Tom.
Hey, good afternoon, Jason.
So I think a lot of people are just curious to know, obviously, families need help, businesses need help, larger businesses as well. What's the timeline for when this money will be delivered to those who can put it to use?
Okay, well, great question. So some is going to be immediate. Some is going to be immediate because one of the goals when we went into this, and being on the Ways and Means Committee, we were involved in some of these initial discussions right from the get-go. And some of the principles that we adopted, you'll see in the policy as it's come through in its final form. We are trying to use existing infrastructure between the federal government and business and the federal government and individuals to get this relief flowing. Also, we are trying to use mechanisms where essentially, if you think about it this way, the dollars that are out in the businesses or in individuals' checking accounts, that you don't send it to Washington, D.C. in order to get it sent back at some point in time with some type of assistance program. Give you some examples of that. That's why we were strong advocates for the income tax date being pushed back, because you had April 15th right around the corner. People were going to be making payments. That would mean that their individual income tax bill, they'd have to write a check, send it to Washington, D.C. That would deplete their checking account, for example. Same thing on businesses. So rather than do that, let's delay it. Doesn't mean they're not going to have to pay it down the road, but at least it at least leaves in the checking accounts of those businesses and individuals that money out in the field. You see that in the employee retention tax credit program. You see that in the employee loan forgiveness program and things of that nature, where that money, and the deferral of the employer payroll tax, for example, with that 6.2%, that for 2020, employers will not have to pay that 6.2% if they qualify, and that will then be deferred and rolled over into 2021 and 2022. Again, that's leaving money on the field in the check books of the businesses there. Why is that important? Because we recognize those businesses need that money in order to cover the payroll of the people that they're continuing to employ through this crisis. And that's one of the other ultimate goals, is to keep employees tied with their employers. So if you look at the two main buckets, it's all about covering payroll costs. It's all about rewarding employer retention and giving them the cash as a result of that decision-making process. With the individual $1,200 check, another goal was, what is the existing infrastructure that we could utilize in this electronic-based economy to get cash to individuals and to the local communities as fast as possible? And one of the things, to give you an example, that $1,200, essentially if you have a Social Security check, you're going to qualify for that $1,200 check, quote unquote. Now, most people, a lot of people have an electronic relationship with themselves and the Treasury, and each year when they do their tax returns, they'll have an electronic direct deposit, something of that nature, or a check taken out of their checking account. And so the Treasury already has a lot of that relationship where people who are paying their bills to the Treasury, money flows from them to D.C. and the Department of Treasury. We're going to use that pipeline, if you want to think about it this way, to essentially push that money back up electronically back to the individuals and into those checking accounts that already been established with the individuals in the IRS and Department of Treasury, I should say. Same thing in the business model. So a lot of that also is going to flow along those lines. So that's a long answer to a question that essentially we are standing with them on day one, because money that otherwise would have been taken out of their checking accounts is staying in those checking accounts. And the money that does need to be delivered from the Department of Treasury here in D.C. to those folks are going to be deployed through the electronic system in a reverse fashion. And then the other thing is, obviously, we've opened up unemployment in a way that the unemployment of yesterday is not the unemployment of today during this crisis. And so that is another resource that folks will be able to access, especially self-employed, independent contractors, the gig employees, and those folks of that nature. It will be readily available to them, and obviously a new source of protection that otherwise wasn't there before.
Very helpful. I think some folks just want to know specifically, do they see the check coming their way if they're going to get that $1,200 check or what have you? Are they going to see that within a week, within 2 weeks? Is that firmed down, that timeline?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, because I had a conversation 4 days ago, I believe it was, with the Treasury Secretary. You know, what is that kind of timeline? And obviously, you know, we passed the bill today. His intention and his purpose is to get that electronic fund flow going as quick as possible. But as you can imagine, you're dealing with 300 million plus people that are going to qualify for that benefit, and where that needs to go is obviously got to be, you know, children. You qualify for $500 on the children, and so it's going to take some time, but there's no hard fast. The intention is to get it out as soon as possible, and then if we have to cut hard checks, that's going to be longer. But you know, a few weeks at the most, I think is realistic with the goal. Remember, we're talking about goal dates. We're doing it much quicker than that. Let's just see how this unfolds, but that money is on its way. It's being injected into the system as we speak, and those that have an electronic relationship with the Treasury are going to see that money much quicker than those that have to wait for the traditional written check being cut.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to Lucas Day.
Hello, Congressman. I know you're doing well, so I'll get right to my question.
Yeah, go ahead, Lucas.
Congressman, there's been some discussion here over the past 24 hours here in the Finger Lakes, Seneca County and Yates County in particular. I know this is a state issue, but I just wanted to get your reaction and to see if your office has received any of this type of feedback. But the chairman of both legislatures of both counties are urging not only state residents, but residents from throughout the country that have had a hotbed, if you will, of COVID-19 activity, stay away from the Finger Lakes region until this can be cleared up. A lot of vacation renters, those that have secondary homes in our area, they're concerned because of the impact it would have not only on local residents, but the healthcare systems in our region. Just your reaction to that, and I wonder if your office has been made aware of these types of declarations by the counties.
Yeah, we've been made aware, and essentially how I view it is a reminder of social distancing. Essentially, you know, if you're in that situation where you're sick, obviously exposing other people to it is not a wise move and should be prevented at all costs. And so, you know, it's part of that expression and just a public statement that, look, if you're sick, we don't want to expose other folks to it. Please honor that social distancing. Also, you know, if you've been around other folks and you've heard this and you see people doing self-quarantine and things like that, the incentive or the advice is, look, if you're in that area and you have been likely exposed to this, please let that 14 days, please let the virus take its natural course, and then we'll see where we stand at that point in time. So to me, these statements are consistent with essentially a social distancing macro recommendation to folks to say, hey, you know what, as we deal with this is probably not the time to travel extensively. Essentially, let's let a couple weeks go by, see where the data is then, and then we'll go from there. But to the point that eventually we're going to be able to say with some confidence that, you know what, we've seen a couple cycles of this virus. We've seen this virus has been here for a little bit of time, quite some time, and every 14 days we get more and more information on how this cycles through because of the incubation period of the virus. So, hopefully this isn't going to be a long-term situation. I really don't believe, that we can make that determination right now. We just have to, day by day, we'll get more information and eventually say, you know what? Let's get back to normal and come enjoy the beautiful Finger Lakes. And actually, that's part. I had a teleconference with some folks, multiple folks, but one of them in particular on, how do we turn the lights back on and position the Finger Lakes from a promotional Finger Lakes tourism perspective, and this also applies across the district because we've been doing these regional calls and even outside the district calls to kind of let's lay some plan here so that when the lights come on back on, we pull the trigger and we get that information out there because people are going to be in need of a super spring fever type of event. And where else would you want to go other than the beautiful western New York areas of the Finger Lakes, Chautauqua, and upstate western New York? And so let's plan now how to take advantage of that opportunity that's going to be around the corner, because this is a great time to introduce people to the Finger Lake once this crisis is behind us.
Well, Congressman, I appreciate your time with us here this afternoon, and thanks for the answer, and take care and get some rest.
I appreciate that, Lucas. All right. We'll have plenty of days for rest down the road. We'll get this crisis taken care of, and then we're standing together. We'll enjoy it.
Take care. Thank you.
Take care.
All right, we got WBEN.
Hi, Congressman. The stimulus package, any estimate on how much of that will be coming to the western New York region?
It's too early to give you any hard numbers on that, but it is significant. I mean, it's $2.2 trillion, and there's so many different buckets in there in regards to where the health dollars would go, where the traditional appropriations of existing relief or appropriated money will go. So, but it will be a significant infusion of cash and a significant retention of cash in western New York because of the mechanisms and macro policies that we were able to successfully put into the bill. We're talking billions. We're talking billions, just so we're talking billions. I think at the end of the day, when you tally it all up and the multiplier effect of the benefit and everything else, I would not be exaggerating to use the term billions to cover this.
Alrighty, thank you, Congressman.
Yep.
Brian O'Neill.
Hello, Congressman.
Hey, Brian. How you doing?
Doing well, and I was wondering, have you heard from Hornell Mayor John Buckley or Alstom officials in Hornell or St. James officials in Hornell? And also, I had a question. What would you say to the small business owners and employees in Hornell, as well as the Alstom and St. James employees, in terms of what stands out from the stimulus legislation most to you?
Well, first of all, we're in constant communication. I've had multiple teleconferences with the mayor, Brian Donovan over at St. James. We just cut the ribbon on that new facility, and that new facility is in great hands. He's a great leader, and he stays in direct communication with me through this on a regular basis, as well as the other healthcare providers and local elected officials and state officials. And so we're communicating all the time. And so the message I would say to businesses of Hornell is, we're going to get through this. This is something that's going to impact all of us. It's Mother Nature throwing us a curveball. And by standing together, we're going to get through it. And so talking to some of the major employers like Alstom and others, I mean, there are concerns that we have to recognize. The supply chain issue is real, especially for a company like Alstom. There are issues that the cash flow through the American economy will touch everyone, including those in Hornell. But at the end of the day, what we do is we learn from the hot spots that are going off in the country. We position ourselves to be prepared for that. Hopefully we never have that situation occur, but if it does, we've learned the lesson. So you have that base capacity, surge capacity, and I can tell you, talking to these local officials in Hornell, as well as all the local officials on both sides of the aisle across the entire district that we've held conference calls with and direct communications with. They've all been given my personal cell phone and email, and many of them are using it, which I appreciate, and I've asked them to. I want that information to be exchanged. We are working together like I've never seen before, and that's what it's going to take for us to have the best outcome coming out of this when we turn the lights back on and get people back to work.
Do you have time for a quick second question, Congressman?
Sure, go right ahead, Brian.
Do you have a sense, and maybe it's too early to ask for any kind of breakdown, but do you have a sense of how much money each individual business, the restaurants, car dealers, barbershops could get, or is it too early to ask that question?
Way too early for that type of data. I mean, just you're talking $2 trillion. So that's a pretty significant chunk of change. And you also got to realize we had the $100 billion in Phase 2. We had $8.3 billion in Phase 1. You also got to realize the multiplier effect of where this dollar will go through the economic ecosystems of the district and of Hornell. And so to put a number on it, you just don't have it at this point in time. So at some point in time we will, but the fundamental thing is it's been delivered. The bill is on its way to the President's desk. That assistance is going to flow. We listened to the folks on the front lines, those businesses and those individuals that are going through this crisis 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.
All right, that's everybody on the line.
You've been muted.
All right, guys.
Press the start.
So I really appreciate it. I got about 12 other things I got to jump to, but guys, thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for being able to accommodate us, and let's stay in contact, and we'll just hopefully I know we will. We'll talk to you next week. Be safe, and the sun's going to come up. Standing together.
Congressman Tom Reed there. We're going to take a 60-second break, and we'll be back with Dr. Robert Heineman, get his analysis of what we just heard.
Lomax Pro Wrench Tire and Auto Center and Body Shop are open for business 6 days a week during this corona crisis. Come to Lomax for new tire sales and major and minor repairs. Get the best fast oil change in Hornell for only $19.95. Lomax has served the Hornell area for 50 years and will continue to serve the motoring public with great values on cars and trucks. Their Pro Wrench Body Shop manager, Chris Doran, will handle your auto body work quickly and compile all insurance claims completely. Thank you from everyone at Lomax, 193 Seneca Street, Hornell. Phone 324-4440. 324-4440 for Lomax Pro Wrench Tire and Auto Center and Body Shop.
And we now join Dr. Robert Heineman, the Alfred University Political Science Professor Emeritus. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Bob.
Quite all right.
Dr. Heineman, I noticed Congressman Tom Reed was unusually somber and very emotional in his opening comments. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty it's a pretty important event for him. It's a pretty important event for the country. I don't think there's any question about that.
Reed, I noticed, would not comment on Kentucky Congressman Tom Massey's delaying of the vote, which turned into be something like a half-hour delay, I think. What were your thoughts on Tom Massey's move, and what did you think of Reed and what he said about Massey?
That Massey's constituents are going to have to make the decision on this kind of activity on his part. I think it was pretty plain from Mr. Reed's response that that's going to happen. That now this Mr. Massey is going to have to deal with not only his fellow congressman, but I think the president is very unhappy with him.
No doubt. Trump spoke publicly and put out tweets really going after the Kentucky Republican Congressman Tom Massey there. Dr. Heineman, what did you get out of the Reed presser there today?
Well, I thought of course, he's on the House Ways and Means Committee, which deals with a tremendous, a lot of this detail that's in this bill. But I thought, frankly, he was really quite well prepared for. I mean, I forget how many pages this thing is, but it must be a huge number of pages in the bill, and trying to read all that legal language and such is quite a challenge. So I thought, frankly, he was really pretty well prepared for what, in fact, they were voting on, and he made a pretty good case, I think, for a lot of it.
Okay. Dr. Robert Heineman, any final thoughts before we get back to our regular programming?
Well, I thought that his response to the questions about how quickly this would go through to the people was on the mark. I mean, they're going to use IRS and perhaps even Social Security, I don't know, but all of these government agencies that already have access to every American in the country in terms of tax returns and things of that sort, they'll be able to pump this money out really pretty quickly, I think, and I thought that was pretty impressive.
Yes. Well, Dr. Heineman, I want to thank you so much for your analysis and for coming on with us for the second time today.
Well, I think having this live was a very useful thing to the public, Brian.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bob. It's AM 1480 WLEA Hornell. We get back to Rush in 30 seconds. Rush's substitute, Ken Matthews.